I can usually tell who's going to quit the gym within the first week, maybe even the first session, and it's not who you might typically think it is. It's not the person who's unmotivated, out of shape, or who's never lifted weights before. Nope, it's simply the person who walks into the gym and does a different workout every single time, who either doesn't really know what they're supposed to be doing or has a vague idea and leaves without any idea of whether they actually made any tangible progress. And as I said, they don't lack motivation. They lack structure. You can only get this structure from creating a map of what you do, otherwise known as logging your training. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again with people who are new to the gym, new to strength training, but also people who go to the gym cluelessly for years. They're pretty much the same person. Here's a scenario to think about. You join the gym, you're shown around the facilities, maybe you get shown a few exercises, you pay your joining fee, then you're basically left on your own. So you start guessing, what exercises should I do? How many sets? How much weight? How often should I train? Am I actually getting stronger? And eventually, the gym becomes another thing you feel like you're failing at. Not that you fail at a lot of things, just, you know what I mean. Or, you pay a premium for a structured program or random group fitness or for a coach, all of which are things you still have to pay extra for on top of your membership. And you haven't even started the gym yet. And so that's what I want to talk about today. Because I don't think most beginners need motivation. As I said, they don't lack motivation. They need their first experience of the gym to actually make sense. There's still a common belief, my bad, there's still a common belief in fitness that people quit because they aren't motivated enough. So you try to solve the problem with motivation. And this is what gyms make money off. Gym challenges, transformation programs, 30-day commitments, before and after photos. Don't make any excuses, all of that BS. And those things can get someone started, but motivation isn't a good system for keeping someone going. Because, like life, motivation naturally fluctuates. You might feel excited to train on Monday, then Wednesday you've had a terrible day at work, and Friday you're tired, and the following week something happens in your personal life. These are all normal. So, if your entire training system depends on how you feel, it's not going to last long. The sooner you realize this, the sooner you can get stronger. And so imagine this. You walked into the gym and on Monday, you did chest and shoulders. And then Wednesday, you did legs. And Friday, you did some machines you haven't used before. And then next week, on the weekend, you watched a TikTok and it completely changed your perspective on an exercise. And then you saw something on Instagram and you change your program that you're doing. Then someone at the gym says, "Oh, you should try this thing, or you should try that thing." A few weeks later, like, have you actually made any progress? Like, what have you actually improved outside of knowing how to train the bicep from a different angle? Like, have you actually tangibly progressed in strength? And that's the problem. And when progress becomes invisible, motivation becomes harder to maintain. And as a parent, as a coach, as someone who's played sports over the years, I, we, or us, as humans, we like feedback. We like knowing, I did this last time, or I did this last week, and I did a little bit more today, or I felt weaker today. I'm not sure why, but, you know, feedback is something we all love. That's one of the reasons I care so much about firstly logging, your training as one of the habits that you should start implementing this sooner rather than later. Not because I want beginners buried in spreadsheets or whatever. It's just because a training log creates a map, And once you know what you've done, you can make better decisions about where to go from there. And you can see where you've been, where you are right now, and where you want to go. This, on top of a few movement competencies, is where I start with most people. I don't want someone who's brand new to training or gymming worrying about programming. They don't need to do 5 different training splits, or, do 12 different exercises every single session, or they don't need to train 6 or more times a week. And they certainly don't need to optimize every variable from day one. They just need to learn how to train. And that's the difference. That's the first stage is essentially about building competency and getting confident quickly. Well, maybe the other way around. More like they need to build confidence quickly, and that comes with a competency, if that makes sense. Learning fundamental movements, learning how to perform, those movements consistently, learning how to record your training, learning how hard, it should feel, managing intensity, learning how to repeat the process, and most importantly, building building the confidence that comes from actually knowing what you're doing, from knowing you're good enough or competent enough from feedback you can see and feel. And this is something I think is missing still in this day and age for a lot of people. And so if you're brand new to training or to the gym, your first win doesn't necessarily need to be that you added 10 kilos to your squat. And, even if that did happen, there's an even more important win there. I know what I'm doing when I work. I know what I'm doing when I walk into the gym. Think about how different that feels. You walk through the doors, you know which exercises you're doing, you know exactly how many sets you're doing, roughly how hard they're supposed to be. You know, you know pretty you do know what you did last time. You know what you're trying to improve. And when you finish your workout and you've logged your workout, that's a completely different experience from wandering around the gym, wondering what to do. And that confidence compounds over years. This is what strength training is to me, after over 13 years of lifting and over a decade of coaching people face to face. Confidence isn't something you simply decide to have. A lot of the time, confidence, as I said, comes from being competent. You do something, you learn it, you repeat it, you get better, and eventually you think, okay, I can actually do this. Most people don't like complicated things. Sometimes they do as an excuse. Okay, like, I was almost going to go on a rant there, but I'm just going to keep following the script. um, but what I'm trying to say is, I simply get people to build habits, to start building evidence that you can show up, you can learn and maintain fundamental movements, that you can progress, that you can stick to something, and eventually it becomes part of your identity. There's no longer someone, you're no longer someone who's trying to get into the gym. You're someone who goes to the gym. That sounded really sounded really corny, but you know what I mean. So if you've just joined a gym, or just started training, or you're getting on that path, here's what I'd recommend. Don't try to completely transform your life this week. Don't train 6 days a week. Don't copy 5 different influences. Don't change your program every time you see something new, or on Instagram or anywhere. Instead, just aim to train 2 to 3 times a week. That's it. Learn a handful of fundamental movements, record what you do, pay attention to how those movements feel, leave a little room to improve next time, then simply do it again. And if you can stick to 3 times, then that's awesome, But 2 consistent sessions are infinitely better than, barely doing 6 sessions a week that you can't and will barely be able to sustain forever. Your goal isn't to improve how motivated you are. Your goal is to start building a system that you can repeat. And this is why I think strength training is such a powerful vehicle for personal development. Because eventually, the lessons become bigger than the gym. You learn that progress needs feedback. You learn you can't rush adaptation. You learn that consistency beats intensity when intensity isn't sustainable. And for me, what is even more important, I think, is just being able to reflect on your performance rather than judge your performance. You learn to adjust. I think reflection, just to go a little bit on a little bit of a rant, reflective performance is about knowing what's affecting you from the outside as well. I'll leave it there for now. And so eventually, strength training becomes less about chasing numbers and more about becoming capable. That's the philosophy behind how I coach. But you don't need any of that philosophy on day one. You don't need any of that. On day one, you just need to know what to do. So if you're new to the gym or feeling a bit lost, I don't think you're necessarily lacking motivation, as I've said. You just need to start mapping, as I said. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but yeah. Anyway, on the screen here, I'm going to put down a competency for stage one of my 3 stage strength formula. I don't, that's just what I've called it at the moment. I don't know. But essentially, I have a 3 stage formula of strength training. Um, and so this is stage one competency. It's mostly all body weight, mostly focused on range of motion and movement quality and learning a few different skills. Now, I no longer work in commercial gym floors, and where this, which is how I came about this system over this last decade of training, as well as from my own training. And so, since I don't do that anymore, I'm putting it online now, and so this is stage one. And I just also want to preface this that strength isn't linear. In my 3 stage formula, someone can be in stage 3 level of strength, but they may not have stage 1 movement competency. And so this leads to imbalances over time. And so the balance is being competent in all 3 stages. So I'm going to put together a school group designed to take you through this entire system. And if you'd be interested in this, simply like and subscribe and stay in the loop. And I'll close the video again with what I've been repeating this whole time, and that getting stronger isn't just about lifting more weights or lifting heavier weights. It's about becoming someone who knows how to train and someone who's becoming more capable.